Hello my friends and welcome, my name is Dennis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. Let's start from the military map reviews. Well, it's been confirmed by the NOAF reports and they have the confirmation also from the drone videos that Ukraine has expanded the ground in the Belgorod Oblast. It means that the Ukrainian forces are now present in Zhuravlyovka village. This area is not far away from the place where Russians started their offensive towards the northern part of the Kharkiv Oblast. So by performing this attack, probably Ukraine wants to create a bridgehead in this village for the further attack towards the Russian positions from the flanks. And by doing so, Ukraine has the possibility to cut the Russian supplies. The only question is whether Ukraine has enough resources for this operation to continue or not. Well, as we know now, Ukraine has some of the issues with the resources. Nevertheless, almost in every of my videos you may see how Ukraine counterattacks. Yes, those counterattacks are small, but they do exist. And as usual, I start my videos from the good news. Here I think that it is a good news. But I wouldn't say so if we speak about, for example, Selydove. It's the eastern direction. It's almost entirely in the gray or in the red zone. So it was yesterday and here is 3 days ago, so you may see that Russians are quite fast in Selydove. And by the way, we have the confirmation about this Russian attack that they wanted to cut the road in Vishneva and they did it partially. So Ukraine has the only way to withdraw the forces from this area and actually from the central part of Selydove using this road. Russians hesitated to attack Selydove for a very long time, almost 1 month they were in the Selydove outskirts, but they created 2 of the bridgeheads and attack from the flanks, all together with a straightforward attack. Our guys on the ground saying that there are tons of the Russian troops, like they're going and going. So maybe the next week Russians will fully occupy Selydove village. And actually it was the biggest settlement on the way for the Russian army to go to Pokrovsk. They hesitate to advance just from a single side. They'll now go from this side as well. And maybe also towards Mirnograd, so Russia wants to push towards Pokrovsk, I would say this year. So their November and December campaign, they will concentrate on this direction. But also in parallel, Russia wants to reach this goal. They want to take those villages under control to force the Ukrainian army to leave this area. So it was yesterday and actually for the last 4 days there were no changes. I believe that for now it's getting harder for the Russians in this area because Ukraine takes the higher ground. But I'm also concerned about the south because it was yesterday and it is today. You may see the advancements of the Russian army entirely in all of those villages. For defense, this area is not really good, just the fields, and Ukraine, from what I know, wasn't able to build a robust defense. If I take the larger picture, you may see Pokrovsk, Pavlograd, the big settlement in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, and the Dnipro city itself. Well, our military and volunteer community is just screaming to build the new defense lines. The Azov commander Denis Redis also said that Ukraine absolutely must right now build more trenches. Some of the local officials tried to build those, but the construction site is mainly abandoned, everything is not finished. So our officer, this time the commander of either battalion, is calling to build the trenches, because for now Ukraine is not ready for defense and Dnipropetrovsk Oblast is just a few kilometers away from Pokrovsk. Why do our soldiers are speaking about it? Well, because the governor of the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast said that everything is good, we're ready for defense, but in fact no. I'm telling you the things as they are, guys, according to the information I have from the open sources and not open sources, but it's not the classified information. We need sometimes to push Ukrainian government to act with the social awareness of the issue, because it looks like sometimes Ukrainian officials and politicians are just blind. And here, what was the reason to not create the defense lines in Pokrovsk? Yes, there are some, but built just by our military, by soldiers, by infantry. No heavy engineering equipment was used. So you just cannot compare the Ukrainian-built defense lines in Pokrovsk compared to what Russia was able to build using lots of the engineering equipment on the southern part of Ukraine. Here the Ukrainian defense lines are not that robust and Russia has all the chances to go to Pokrovsk. If they occupy this town, it will be very bad for Ukraine, first of all from the strategic point of view, because this town is located on a crossroad, there is also a railroad going, and the other thing that 70% of all of the coal which is used to produce the steel steel in Ukraine is located in Pokrovsk. So if Russia occupies those factories, they'll force Ukraine to buy the expensive coal from the South Africa, for example. And Ukraine is the steel producing country. 1/3 of all of the export goods is the steel. That's why I'm saying that this town is very important from any sort of the perspective, from the military one and from the economical one. For this reason, I definitely have this question: why? Why the defense lines are so weak here? Well, not even in a Pokrovsk city, but on approach as well. Then Russians occupied Avdiivka, it was understandable that the next move for them will be Pokrovsk. By the time our commanders, including the Azov commander, already said that Ukraine should prepare the defense lines to protect Pokrovsk. And what worries me that now they're saying that Ukraine should protect the defense lines between Pokrovsk and Belgorod. So the Pokrovsk town is the key for everything. Next, Russia may move towards north to bypass all of those very important settlements, or definitely to go to Belgorod because there is the straight road towards it. In this case, we're gonna speak about Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, which goes something like that. But now the aim for Russia is to occupy the Donetsk Oblast. That's why I think that finally they will not go to Belgorod. However, Ukraine should be ready for this scenario. I think that Russians will try to bypass all of this entire group of the settlements from the Pokrovsk direction, as I showed you, simultaneously striking from Toretsk and Bakhmut. About the southern area, it's not that populated, so for Russia it will be easier to capture this part than the northern side, where Ukraine may use those settlements for defense, but it's getting trickier, as you see. If we speak about the Donetsk Oblast alone, this year Russia definitely moved a lot, taking this territory and also Vuhledar area. About the Vuhledar directions, here we have the advancement of the Russian forces, but also they have the losses. This video I'll share on my Telegram channel. So there's the huge Russian convoy which they sent all the vehicles close together, and obviously they went under Ukrainian drone strikes and the convoy was kaputted. Well, at least this one, because later on Russians may send more and more troops. That's the biggest issue now for Ukraine, because Russia has more resources and we can clearly see it. Nevertheless, Ukrainian soldiers fight as hard as they can. And Russians continue to use their Hunger tanks. Definitely those are more secured against the drone strikes. Usually they build those tanks on the base of T-62. The T-62 in general is quite useless, but in this cover it may go further under the drone strikes. A tragic day for the Russian helicopter aviation. They've lost a Mi-28 attack helicopter today. It was confirmed by many of the Russian channels, Eternal Flight Brothers. Also, Russia lost K-27 multi-purpose helicopter, which also can be used to find the enemy submarines, because it has the radar on the front, as you may see. Also, Russians are using those kind of the helicopters to fight against the Ukrainian drone boats. But according to the recent information, Ukraine tries to install some of the anti-aircraft system on the drone boats, and maybe it worked this time, because this helicopter crashed today not far away from the Kerch Bridge. Finally, Zelensky signed the special law which allows the foreign officers to join the Ukrainian army, directly entering the officer position. So not just the soldiers are allowed now to fight on the front lines. We also need officers, commanders, capable guys. They may not have this kind of the experience fighting with the Russian army, but they have the good skill in their armies, also their own experience, and most of all they follow the modern standards of the army, because many of the Ukrainian commanders are still coming from the old Soviet Union, which is obviously not good. The younger generation commanders, I would say, based on experience, are the best of the best, because they were not serving in the Soviet army. My friends, if you like the job that I do on YouTube, you may also consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put my Patreon link just in the video description below. Thank you so much for maintaining my motivation.
Ukrainians are going to have to make that decision themselves, but Chris, man, they're already so exhausted. When you talk to, Ukrainian leaders, especially in private, but even in public, they're starting to say this now. They're saying this can't go on forever. They don't have the manpower, they don't have the equipment, they don't have the money. And so I think ultimately, again, Ukraine is going to have to make that decision. Russia is going to have to, of course, make the decision about what it will do to stop the fighting. But we're going to have to get these guys together. We don't have to like Russia. We don't have to agree with them invading, but we've got to get them together and engage in some real diplomacy, or this thing's going to go on forever.
So we are here with a statement of J.D. Vance. I don't really like this guy, but he could be the next vice president of the United States of America. I don't like him not because of this statement, but because previously he suggested Ukraine should give up some of its lands to end the war. Well, basically he says mostly the same stuff, that Ukraine should now negotiate with Russia under no NATO membership and no guarantees from our allies, so I think it's not a good way for Ukraine. At the same time, the part of his words are correct. I mean, people are definitely exhausted in Ukraine. All of the Ukrainian men who wanted to join the Ukrainian army are already there, or they're just gone. So Ukraine is now performing this forced mobilization, which no one likes. Me either, because there are multiple of other ways of how to motivate people to join the army. But the thing is that still Ukraine is out of the military tool, so the weaponry. Zelensky doesn't want for now to lower the age for the mobilization. I have already showed you that if Ukraine mobilizes the men from 20 to 25, the destiny of the country, I mean for the population, is very foggy. So the problems are understandable, but the conclusion which this politician makes is absolutely wrong. He wants Ukraine to negotiate to trade its territory for the temporary peace. Why the peace could be temporary, or why it will be temporary? Because Russia doesn't see Ukraine as the separate state without their direct control. So actually there are two ways for Putin in his head how he might deal with Ukraine: to put his own puppet government at first, or the second variant, which he is doing right now, is to occupy the country. You see, previously there was the pro-Russian government in Ukraine, I mean 10 years ago, and Ukrainian President Yanukovych after all fled to the Russian Federation. So Putin saw how he is losing the control over, as he thinks, his lands, and he decided to start this big war, not to let Ukraine to fully go out from Russia. But he also thought, and it was his mistake, that Ukrainian people do like Russia. That's why he entered Ukraine with just a limited amount of the forces, not enough to occupy the country. Nevertheless, it was the task given to a little bit more than 160,000 soldiers. And now for Putin it's too late to switch the reverse gear, as he thinks. He sees his golden ticket in those kind of the politicians in the United States. He wants Donald Trump to take the power, together with the possible Vice President J.D. Vance. They would like to trade Ukraine for Russia just to have some sort of the good relations with Russia because they have nukes. You see that the attitude towards Ukraine changed, especially in the Republican camp. To be more precise, the MAGA camp. And here the Russian propaganda via Twitter plays a great role. I don't think that J.D. Vance and Trump directly paid by Russia, no. But their political interests are now fit with the Russians. They want to force Ukraine for not good peace. Why is it not good? Well, I said to you about it many of the times, because Ukraine will be under strike the second time in the coming years. And Putin actually will never ever sign the peace agreement with Ukraine if there will be the robust guarantees as NATO or the direct guarantees from the United States of America. And you know, guys, if Donald Trump wins the elections, I do not expect anything good for Ukraine. Again, it is only my opinion, but it is based on facts, based on what they're saying openly.
Russia would have never gone into Ukraine if I were president.
How would you have stopped it?
Automatic, two things. I told him. I said, Vladimir, you're not going in.
He continued to say that stuff in every of his rallies. It means that he doesn't understand of what's going on between Ukraine and Russia. Putin was unstoppable with his decision to attack Ukraine. It doesn't matter who is the United States president or president of France, who by the way visited Russia before the full-scale attack. But Donald Trump still thinks that he is special, magician who may order Putin what to do. And he never ever tells the action of how he would force Putin not to attack Ukraine. The simple word here is not enough. You know, guys, in the previous Donald Trump's administration, there were some of the counterbalances to his opinion. In the current administration, no. I would say that it could be the most populist and incompetent administration in entire United States history, especially if we speak about the foreign policy. And Putin said in his interview that Russia is ready to negotiate, but only under the Russians' terms, based on the Istanbul agreements which Ukraine quit in 2022, and also the current situation on the ground. But everything shows that Russia is not willing to stop, and Putin personally. I mean, after all, Putin has has some of the friends from BRICS, he feels not entirely isolated. Russia is still capable to trade with some other countries even under the sanctions. So I would say that even during this hard time, Russia is still capable to continue the war. But not for a long time, I think maximum for a couple of years, because there are very bad things start to happen with the Russian economy. The things are not going well in the Russian bank sector and the Russian economy in general. The inflation in Russia is now 27%. It's one of the highest in the world. Because of that, the governor of the Bank of Russia, Elvira Nabiullina, by the way, she is a very talented professional in a Russian team. It's a very rare case. Well, she said that the Bank of Russia increases the rate up to 21% from 19%. And the key rate is forecasted even to grow up to 24% the next year. It means that for the Russian private sector, business and other banks, it will be really hard to get credits. The cheap money in Russia do not exist any longer. It will also lead to the drop of the ruble. Well, why is it happening? Because Russian government uncontrollably spends the funds for their military at the same time that there are some export issues to the Western countries. So $20,000 or $30,000 for the Russian soldiers are not coming from the skies. No, it all affects the Russian economy. As forecasted by analytics, and I did this report on my Patreon page by the way, the official rate of a single dollar in Russia could reach 130 rubles the next year, because Russia absolutely should free their currency, at least partially, to avoid two of the rates and drop the Russian economy into the dark sector. Yes guys, it's the official site of the Russian Central Bank, and here you can see the old rate 19% and the new key rate 21%. It's the record highest in the history of the Russian Federation. It wasn't that high even during the 90s. Then Russia was really struggling during this collapse, and here they have this big, I would say, not the advertisement, but the warning that we have risen the key rate to 21%. We have the 2100 and we are screaming about it. Well, actually, after Russia started the full-scale war against Ukraine and all of those sanctions were applied, Nabiullina said that it's the end. I need to go. I want to leave my position as the governor of the central bank because it's just useless. There were even the news from that time saying that she wanted to quit in March 2022. But Putin said no, he just forced her to stay because he wouldn't be able to find such a professional. You know, the Russian regime is like this crime group mafia with Putin as the boss and many people working for him, and you cannot leave that mafia on your own. And Nabiullina is just a cleric, but a talented cleric, and she knows her job very, very well. That's why also the Russian economy still holds, because she tries also to save it. She also has the good team which works well, but even they cannot solve the major problem of the Russian economy. So finally, it is going to collapse. Someday, there could be years to come for it, but this process is imminent. That's why she wanted to leave her position. Let's continue with the politician news. There are elections ongoing in Georgia. The pro-Russian party, the Georgian Dream, won the elections. It is understandable already. But in general, they may get less than 50% from all of the votes. It means that the coalition in the parliament could be formed by the opposition forces, which are pro-Western forces, pro-EU forces, and basically those are democracies. The plan for the Georgian Dream, so the pro-Russian party, was to gain the absolute majority, and they wanted to ban many of the opposition parties. Here, probably they are unable to do it. For now, they are still calculating the votes, so the pro-Russian party and the ruling party say that they've got more than 50%. I would say that the main problem for the Georgian opposition that they were not able to generate a single massive power able to conquer the ruling party. I still wonder how the pro-Russian party may actually rule Georgia after the war in 2008. Then the part of the Georgia was just occupied by the Russian forces. Well, you know, the same thing happened in Chechnya. Russians, after all, occupied Ichkeria, called it Chechnya, after the Second Chechen War. By the way, Russians themselves recognized Ichkeria as the sovereign republic. Russians also, by the way, recognized Ukraine as the sovereign republic with Crimea and all of the territories, and later on they've just started the full-scale war. So any sort of the agreements with Russians do not really work. They understand the language of power, of weapons, that's it. Alright, to the international news, yesterday finally Israel responded on Iranian attack on its territory. Remember the day that there were tons of the ballistic missiles hitting the infrastructure in Israel and also unaliving one of the Palestinian guy. So finally Israel decided to respond, yes, with their aviation. The strikes were mostly carried out by F-15s, F-16s, and also F-35 was used during that attack. We have even this photo of the aircraft departing the last night. I'll not show you the kabooms because of the YouTube policy. They happen in Tehran, the capital city of Iran, but I may show you the satellite images. So it was before and it is after. You may see that it's the Iranian base and the structures of it were kaboomed. As it was reported, Iran lost the air defense system, at least one. Some of the buildings were hit, as you saw in the satellite image, and also the strike cancelled completely those Iranian militants. One of those is confirmed to be the operator of the air defense unit. So actually, as you may see, aviation plays a great role in any sort of the conflict, and because of that, in general, the Israeli military is so strong. By the way, guys, in the coming years, Ukraine will also be strong in aviation. We have the good news about it. Well, first of all, we have the news that the United Kingdom completes the training of 200 Ukrainian pilots. British minister says they will soon be flying F-16s. We're speaking about the newcomers, the cadets, young pilots with a fresh mind. Yes, it takes a while for them to fly F-16s professionally, but they'll do it, I would say, even better compared to the trained Ukrainian pilots who fly nowadays MiG-29s or Sukhoi 27s. Yeah, those are the guys, they have finished the training on those piston engine airplanes. The next step is the jet training aircraft and after that F-16 or maybe some other jet. Why is it so important to train those youngsters? You may remember yourself in that age, then you are enthusiastic, you are open to receive all of the information. Basically, yes, your mind is fresh. But then you are trained in the Soviet school, you fly MiG-29 for all your entire career. You'll implement the part of your experience to F-16 or the airplane you need to fly, the Western-made airplane. And the logic there is really different. So any aviation specialist would say that yes, it's better to train young pilots who have no previous bad experience. In this case, it definitely could be a bad experience. Our guys who fly MiG-29s and Sukhoi 27s, they really fly awesome, but the airplanes which they fly are not enough. The training which they obtain in the Soviet Union or even in the modern independent Ukraine is not enough in the modern realities. I know myself that even in 2006 in the Kharkiv Aviation Academy, where they train the fighter pilots, pilots learn how to deal with the enemy. The enemy by that time in the books was still NATO. So even the post-Soviet training is not that great. What is happening right now is just awesome. The only downside which we see here that it takes time. It could take even years. But after all, Ukraine is on the way to obtain the capable Air Force, like for example in Norway, Denmark. Probably in the future Ukraine may also get F-35s. I honestly believe that it could happen even without direct donation of those airplanes to Ukraine. Ukraine may order them in its own case. And the role of the military aviation is absolutely enormous. For now, Ukraine doesn't have lots of the aircraft to operate freely. Russia has more of the airplanes, and in general their fighter jets are more capable compared to F-16, and Ukraine is on the right way. Those 200 pilots will make a real deal. 200 pilots may operate 100 airplanes in the future, and 100 airplanes with all of the stuff they may carry, well, they may replace 200,000 soldiers actually. If we speak about the battle power, obviously they'll work together with infantry, with tanks and others. It should be like an orchestra, and for that Ukrainian army in general should be reformed as well as the Air Force. So the changes which I see today in Ukrainian Air Force especially are positive. My friends, please don't forget to press your huge like to this video. By doing so, you help me a lot. And as usual, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are and have a great time.